So you want to go back to Egypt? You want to go back to that very thing that God has delivered you from? That old addiction? That immoral relationship? That sinful lifestyle? Can I ask you a question? Why would you want to go back to your chains? Well, I'll tell you why. Because you've forgotten where you've come from. You've forgotten what God has delivered you from. And you're not the first person to feel this way. The scriptures tell us that the Israelite people were feeling the same way when they were about to cross over into Canaan, the land that God had promised to deliver into their hands. Numbers chapter 14 verse 4 tells us, "And they said to one another, 'Let us make a captain, and let us return to Egypt.'" Now they were just about to cross over into the promised land. They had sent 12 spies into the land. 2 of them came back and said, "The land is just as God has promised us. It's a land overflowing with milk and honey." But 10 of them came back and said, "The land has fortified cities, and there are giants living there." And the people got scared. They didn't trust God to deliver that land into their hands as He had promised to do. Now, this was the same God that had brought them out of slavery in Egypt, that had brought the 10 plagues on the Pharaoh and the land of Egypt, that had parted the Red Sea and allowed them to cross over safely, the same God that destroyed the pursuing Egyptian army, and the same God that miraculously fed them manna in the wilderness. But when the going got a little bit tough, when a new challenge was lying ahead of them, they began to look backwards at that old life that they had left. And they began to say to themselves, well, the food was not so bad. That we had a little bit of comfort there, and at least it was familiar to us. They had forgotten that they were enslaved in Egypt. They were in bondage, and God had delivered them. But isn't that just like us today? When we're following Jesus and it gets a little tough, maybe we're struggling, maybe there's a new challenge laying ahead of us, we begin to look backward at that old lifestyle that we left. And we begin to say to ourselves, well, it doesn't seem so bad back then, and it was comfortable. It was my sin. At least my sin was familiar to me. But we forget about the chains. We forget the bondage that God delivered us from. Let me ask you this question. If your Egypt was so good, why were you crying out to God to be delivered? So don't let a temporary struggle today lead you to return to your Egypt, where you'll become permanently imprisoned, back into bondage. There's a story about the Spanish explorer Cortez, that when he landed in Mexico to explore the land, one of the first things he did was burn the ships that had brought them there. Why? Because he knew that as long as those ships remained, that he and his men had a way to return to their old life. That when the going got tough, as they were exploring Mexico, they'd be tempted to get in those ships and return and go back to where they came from. Some of us are struggling today because we haven't burned our ships. We've left the door open to return to our Egypt. We've got a backup plan of some sort, or got some secret exit strategy in mind. But following Jesus means that we come to a point where we stop planning our retreat and start trusting God with our future. Friends, your Egypt is behind you. Be like Cortez. Burn your ships. Now, if God has delivered you from your old life, Put in the comments below, burn your ships. Burn your ships. And if you know of someone that this message could help, please share it, pass it along to them. And if you'd like to continue this conversation, just email me at info@jesusfreaksministry.com. And remember, Jesus loves you. He wants what's best for you. He wants to give you a new heart, a new life, and a new purpose in Him.